What is going on, Andrew Zimmel? Zimmel TV episode numero tres of our live shows. If you want to be part of the show, you can comment below. You also can tweet at me at Andrew_Zimmel on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. We're also on Blue Sky and Threads as well. Just search the name Andrew Zimmel. We are there. Good response so far in week numero uno of doing live shows. I want to thank you guys for helping us build that subscriber base up. Remember, brick by brick, day by day, we are going to build the best sports talk show on the internet. And again, you can see little things. Little things are changing. Every single day, we're making it a little bit better for you. Got a lot to talk about. This is the last live show of the week. Tomorrow, I fill in for Craig Way on AM 1300 The Zone. You can listen to that on the free iHeartRadio app. You also can hear my pregame coverage of Spurs. I'll be on the Spurs pregame at Spurs Center. That is happening tomorrow as well. 5:30 pregame, 6 p.m. tip as the Spurs travel to Charlotte, take on the Hornets. They won big yesterday in a game number one with De'Aaron Fox. Yeah, the Fox is back. It's fun. I heard something interesting from Eddie Jones. He was talking about why the De'Aaron Fox trade makes so much sense and why it works with Wemby. I thought it was kind of interesting. He was saying that because De'Aaron Fox is left-handed, it works a lot more. It just works better with a left-handed point guard and a right-handed dunker like Wembanyama is. So it's kind of cool. I'm all for that. I like those little intricacies. Nobody talks about it. I want to thank our friend Bam2488 being in the chat. Yeah, no, the Spurs yesterday 126-125 against the Atlanta Hawks. And we'll get to it because that's where we're starting the show off today. We'll talk Super Bowl in the back half of the show. The front half of the show, though, has to be NBA trade deadline conversation, as it was a very active one. But news broke right before we came on talking about, let's get it up here for you. Here it is. Yeah, Shohei Ohtani, his interpreter, Ipe Mizurane, we'll figure out how to pronounce that last name. He's now been sentenced to 57 months in federal prison on charges relating to stealing nearly $17 million from the Dodgers star. Yeah, so his interpreter is going to jail. So what is that, 3-4 years? 4 years and some change. Not great for him at all. We always kind of hinted, at least I did, that this was not the interpreter's fault that this happened, that this always kind of felt something was missing. There was something going on shady behind the scenes with Ipe, his translator, and Shohei Ohtani. We don't know what the true story is, and we'll never really know what the true story was or what it will be. He's just taking the fall for his guy. It probably saves baseball, to be completely honest with you. If the biggest star in the game was betting on games, a la Pete Rose, it would not be good. Jontay Porter, a literal nobody in the NBA. Nobody knew who Jontay Porter was until he got busted for betting on games. And even then, the NBA did a pretty good job of kind of sweeping it under the rug. So huge news out of baseball that Shohei seems to have got off scot-free. The Dodgers continue to bankroll players all the way into the 2050s. We'll see how them pushing money back, how that finally rolls out, and how that eventually where the line in the sand is. But yeah, no, 57 years in prison for stealing money, 17 million from Shohei Ohtani. Let's talk trade deadline, because this was the biggest deal of the day. It was arguably, in a lot of people's minds, the biggest trade deadline in NBA history. You look at some of the stars there. Jimmy Butler got moved. Luka Doncic clearly got moved. Kyle Kuzma, Andrew Wiggins, Dalton Knecht, Marcus Smart, Valanciunas got moved. Schroeder got moved 4 times today. Anthony Davis, Brandon Ingram, Zach LaVine, Mark Williams. We have Chris Middleton, De'Aaron Fox. Yeah, big moves across the board. It was arguably the biggest trade deadline ever. And the saddest part is that we didn't have Woj there to break all the news for us. Not great. The big one last night, 11:30. Jimmy Butler is officially a member now of the Golden State Warriors, if you can believe that. We heard that the Warriors were going after every single star. They were turning they were leaving no stone unturned when it came to trying to put a star next to Steph Curry. They really, really are trying to figure out a way to make these last few seasons with Curry, the tail end of his prime, into something. But you got to go back and you got to think. And we'll get to Kevin Durant here in a minute. But you got to think that after that 2019 finals run where they went to four straight finals, that core group, KD went to 3 straight, two with the Cavs and then 1 against the Raptors. You got to think that if they would have just treated Kevin Durant just a little bit better, if they would have moved on from Draymond Green, or if they even just addressed the fact that Draymond Green went over the line when it came to the way that he spoke to and about Kevin Durant in the locker room, if there just was a little bit more respect from that organization towards their superstar, how different the timeline would be. Yeah, I understand that KD missed essentially a whole season rehabbing that Achilles injury. And yeah, it would have probably changed some things, but you also have to consider that they were in a position, the Warriors were, to draft Steph Curry's replacement in a lot of ways in LaMelo Ball. And they decided to not draft Ball, instead go with James Wiseman, who now is out of the league. There was a lot of butterfly moments, a lot of domino effect moments throughout the end of this dynasty that the Warriors had. And even then, they still were able to win the championship in 2022. So you might say getting rid of KD, drafting James Wiseman, trading for Andrew Wiggins, all paid out. I would say if you wanted to be competitive, if you wanted to try to build a dynasty like the ones that the Celtics in the 80s and the Lakers in the 80s and 90s and the Lakers in the 2000s, if you wanted to compare and try to build a dynasty like those other great dynastic teams, you shouldn't have tried to microwave your success. And that's exactly what the Warriors did. And now they're trying to microwave 4-day-old Taco Bell. And that is in what Jimmy Butler is. 4-day-old Taco Bell that you're throwing in the microwave, hoping that it's going to be just as good as it was coming out of the drive-through window, and it will not be. The Miami Heat finalized a deal. They send Jimmy Butler to Golden State for Andrew Wiggins, Dennis Schroeder, who's no longer with the team. He's now with Jazz, I believe, and Kyle Anderson, and a protected first-round pick. Seems like they gave up a lot for Jimmy Butler. He then, in turn, signed a deal. We'll get to Shams' Twitter here. He then signed a deal to stay in Golden State. That deal was I want to say it was a 2-year deal to continue to be in Golden State. So let's keep it moving. We also have the reaction. This is from NBA Today earlier today, and of course on ESPN.
About the Heat and Jimmy Butler. This is finally behind them. Jimmy gets a fresh start out in the Bay Area. What does it mean to Miami moving forward to have this behind them and be able to try to figure it out ahead of them?
I think a lot of people in Miami today are exhaling that this is over and they can move on with their season. This had become a cloud on their season. And of course, Jimmy Butler, he was able to get exactly what he's wanted out of this saga, out of this 2-month saga. He got his trade and he got his extension, but the Heat, they were ready to move on. And in Andrew Wiggins, this is really a perfect fit for them.
I wouldn't say a perfect fit for Andrew Wiggins. He is a guy who in Minnesota was a little lackadaisical, and it took him going to Golden State to play around guys like Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green to really unlock the potential that a lot of us saw when he was at Kansas. A lot of us thought that Andrew Wiggins was going to be the type of guy who could lead you to a championship on his own, let alone on a team with other first-round draft picks in Karl-Anthony Towns, and then, of course, he had Jimmy Butler as well. It is ironic, though, how weaved together this whole thing is, that Butler, who essentially caused great trauma and distress to Karl-Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins, and I think partially is a reason that neither of those players is on the Wolves anymore, is because of that massive meltdown he had in Minnesota, with the Wolves. He called Karl-Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins 2 of the softest players in the league. And then the Wolves had to trade Andrew Wiggins a few seasons later, and then they traded Karl-Anthony Towns this offseason. And I don't think the stain and the reprieve of what happened will ever really go away. I don't think it washes off Yeah, Bogdanovich was my favorite player, and De'Aaron Hunter was fun to watch. That is a take we're going to get to here in a second here with the Hunter one, because the Cavaliers have sneakily built one of the best teams in the NBA that nobody is talking about. They went off on that really hot start, and since then have kind of cooled off. They started off, I think they were going to be like 74-8 was the pace that they were on, and now they've kind of come back down to earth. People are comparing them to the Atlanta Hawks of the 2015 season. I don't see that at all. I think that this Cavs team is a lot more legit. But again, we'll get to the Hunter take here in a moment. If you want to join the show, if you want to be part of the show, feel free to comment in the YouTube comment section. We'll get you get those takes going over there as well. So I look at the Andrew Wiggins move for Jimmy Butler, and it feels like the Warriors are really trying to turn chicken scratch into chicken salad. It just does not feel like the type of move that an organization that truly believes that they are competing for titles does. This Butler situation, he's 35 years old. He might pick up, he signed a 2-year deal, essentially an extension. He's no longer has a player option. He's going to be under contract for 2 more seasons. I just think to myself, at age 37, we're paying him like $50 million. And again, Miami got better. They get rid of a distressed asset, which is huge in this market. I think that's the biggest deal out of this whole thing. This is another one. Another big trade happened overnight, and that would be Mark Williams, who was, I should say, the starting center for the Charlotte Hornets. Now, there was a lot of talk about his engine and his motor and how his inability to chase down on defense or really put any sort of effort into a lot of those Hornets games that they continue to lose big in. He gets traded to LA. LA fans immediately on top of all over themselves about how well that they think this trade is going to work here.
You're saying, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I asked for
wanted a
center for like a year, and now you guys go out and make this deal. He does have injury concerns. He's played 85 games in 2.5 seasons, but when he's on the court, he's the type of player that Dave was describing for Luka.
I will say this. The assets they were able to use in this deal are the assets that did not go to Dallas in the Luka deal.
That is exactly right.
Dalton Connect. Obviously, when Dallas first started having conversations with the Lakers, of course they asked for Dalton Connect. Of course they asked for both picks. But because they couldn't talk to Luka, because the Lakers couldn't loop in Luka and see if he wanted to be there, they were able to hold on more of their assets for a trade just like this.
Which you got to admit is some of the dumbest work ever done by a general manager. I know Nico Harrison has gotten it a lot in the media. I know that he's right now probably villain number 1 outside of maybe Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City this week. That he is the main character, the main villain. But you got to think, you wanted to keep it under wraps. Because you kept the trade under wraps, because you didn't talk to Luka and you didn't let the Lakers talk to Luka or his agent, what you essentially did is you handicapped yourself if you were Dallas. And now those picks now turn into Mark Williams. I will say this, Mark Williams, very athletic, 23-year-old, young, up-and-coming center in this league. You got to think, the Laker fan base, post Shaquille O'Neal, and I put this tweet up earlier today, the Laker fan base post Shaquille O'Neal has been absolutely brutal on their big men. You think about Chris Mim, Kwame Brown, Andrew Bynum, Paul Gasol, Anthony Davis, Roy Hibbert, Timothy Mozgov, JaVale McGee. All of these guys got it in the media, by the fans. When you have a legendary player like Shaquille O'Neal, of course, the bar is set so enormously high. It's almost impossible to reach those levels. But Laker fans expected every one of those former players, every one of those players I mentioned, to be that level of guy, or at least be close to it. But Pau Gasol was soft, and Andrew Bynum was weak, and Dwight Howard, they threw slurs at him. Okay, they started rumors about him in the media. And I think to myself, okay, you get a 23-year-old who's very athletic, and they're comparing him to DeAndre Jordan with the Clippers. The ability to lob. Luka loves a good pick and roll. He loves the ability to go and get his big man involved. I just think to myself, like, this is going to end very poorly for him. If he thinks that he's coming to LA with open arms, do not let Laker fans confuse you. They are wolves in sheep's clothing. They will eat you alive if you let them. You cannot allow that to happen if you are Mark Williams. So let's keep going. Ingram to the Raptors. Again, another play that happened overnight. This one does not intrigue me nearly as much. I liked Brandon Ingram. I thought that he was a good player. And honestly, between him and Zion, I would have kept him. Zion doesn't play. Brandon Ingram is a good scorer. He's not the type of player you can win a ton of games with. But if you were able to pair him with a star, you might have something. So he goes to Toronto for Bruce Brown Jr., Kelly Olynyk, and 1 first round and a second round pick. According to Shams, that was broken over the night. Ingram joins Scotty Barnes and RJ Barrett in a very good young core. And you have to think to yourself, if you are the Raptors, is this the answer that we've been looking for post Kawhi Leonard? It's been about 5 years since Kawhi left Toronto. Since then, completely rudderless organization. They got their championship. They thought they were able to compete for championships post Kawhi Leonard. Not the case at all. In fact, they've been one of the worst franchises after a championship. There's a lot of teams that, according to Bill Simmons, the championship belt, you try to hold on to the belt, you try to repeat, you want to have another good title defense. There's a lot of teams that have done a worse job in title defense. The Raptors are in the conversation with one of the worst title defenses in NBA history. They have completely lost their way. I don't know where they go from here. Brandon Ingram is a good move because he's a good player, but he's not the type of player you're going to win championships with. If you think Scotty Barnes is that guy, all I have to say is good luck to you. I don't think that he's that type of player either. The Raptors have a lot of work to do going forward, trying to figure out where this goes. Now, one of the players that was not moved at the offseason, who was rumored to be moved consistently over the last 48 hours, first it was going to be to Miami in a Jimmy Butler trade. Then it was going to be to Golden State before rumors of KD nixing that trade. Said, I don't want to go to Golden State after the way that they treated him and everything else. He likes Phoenix, I guess. Him and Bradley Beal really enjoy the scenery of Phoenix. This is from NBA Today earlier today. As committed as Devin Booker is, how long will that last? McMenamin, who's an NBA insider, I thought really broke it down well here.
What was the mood around the locker room last night, Tim?
Howdy, Malika. I tried to get Kevin Durant's thoughts. We can imagine what he's thinking. My attempt did not succeed. He very glumly walked by, head down. I don't want to talk, man. And look, we all know Kevin Durant is one of the most approachable players, superstars for sure, in the league for us as media. So that tells you what his mood was. The locker room, very quiet. Bradley Beal's, he's been the subject of trade talks for months, despite the fact that he has a no-trade clause. But look, the most important guy here is Kevin Durant, a guy who, by the way, is 26 points away from joining the 30,000-point club. We should be celebrating this guy's career right now. He's still playing at an elite level, at an all-NBA level, and you guys are talking about picking up the pieces. If you're Kevin Durant, if you're Bradley Beal, you know the Suns, with Beal, they desperately tried to trade him. With Durant, they at least entertained the thought for days and days and days and kind of had you lingering out there in trade speculation as the deadline neared. How are you not thinking for the rest of the season as your phone's blowing up, as your buddies in the league are probably trying to get in your ear? How are you not thinking about where your potential next destination can be? And how are you going to focus on the Phoenix Suns while you have all that going on? So this is a very fragile, awkward situation that the Phoenix Suns have on their hands.
Yeah.
Then I think the obvious next question is, as committed as Devin Booker is now, if the Suns can't figure out how to get this thing in the right direction, how long will that last?
So that's a conversation I've been having forever at this point. I've been saying this for the longest time. How long is Devin Booker going to be happy in Phoenix with how much turmoil and inability to win games they've had? And it stinks because you would think that this team would be better. If you told me 5-10 years ago that it's Devin Booker, it's Kevin Durant, it's Bradley Beal, all guys who at one point or another were top 10 players. I think Devin Booker, post that 2021 finals run, was considered a top 10 guy in a lot of circles. Kevin Durant, even post Achilles injury, has been a top 10 guy. Bradley Beal, in again, 2015 time period, all NBA type player. So the fact that these guys haven't been able to win games is incredibly dumb to me. The inability to consistently put winning seasons together. We talk about Luka a lot in the, he should have got moved from the Mavs. when he beat the Phoenix Suns in Game 7 and really beat them like a drum, and this was, what, 2 years ago now? It fundamentally changed something in the chemistry of those guys' brains. I have to believe that those guys have not been able to look themselves in the mirror since Luka Doncic took them behind the woodshed and beat them like a drum. And you're right, Devin Booker at some point will want out. It's just is a matter of time if the Suns cannot find a way to win. And they couldn't move Bradley Beal. He's one of 2 players with a no trade clause. Funny how that works. And Kevin Durant didn't want to go back to Golden State. So if he would have been traded to Golden State, you get an already who's a very moody player in general. You would get a very unhappy Kevin Durant in Golden State, and nobody wants that. Nobody in the Bay Area wanted that, and nobody in Phoenix wanted that either. Finally, Marcus Smart was traded today. That doesn't, again, really move the needle too much to me. He ends up getting traded from Memphis for a multi-deal where he goes to the Washington Wizards. It's him and it's Chris Middleton are the 2 players who now are going to be leading the way for Washington. That franchise is so beyond distraught. And I said this yesterday on the show, how I was very disappointed in the way that Milwaukee handled their business when it came to dealing with Chris Middleton. Sending him to Washington, I felt like was the most disrespectful thing in the world. And it hasn't come out that he wanted to go to Washington. It'd be one thing if it was a guy from the DMV, it was a guy from Baltimore or Maryland or Virginia or a suburb, and they had family in the area. That'd be one thing. And it said, hey, I want to go play near my family at the end of my career. But at 33 years old and trying to compete for titles, and you go to a team that has single-digit wins past the halfway mark of the season, that's just disrespectful. At that point, it's just wrong to do. And that's exactly what the Bucks did to Middleton. And now I think Memphis, who has already been bamboozled once with a contract like this. Chandler Parsons went to Memphis and didn't play, took a huge salary, didn't play, wasn't interested in playing. Marcus Smart has done a similar thing, and at least that's what people have said, and that's the kind of the vibe around the Memphis Grizzly fan base right now, from my understanding, is that they feel like he kind of took them for a ride in a lot of ways. So him getting sent to Washington makes sense. Chris Middleton did no wrongdoing to be sent to an organization that stinks. And Marcus Smart trying to steal money from the Memphis Grizzlies, I think their fan base and their ownership group thinks, yes, you did do something. You do deserve to end up going to the Wizards. All right, now, this is the last interesting story of the day, at least in the trade deadline to me. And then we'll talk about winners and losers. So I am all in on distress assets. I couldn't be more in on distress assets. If you have a superstar, if you have a star that you don't want anymore, or a guy who has talent that you don't want anymore, I'm all in on bringing him in. And by the way, BAM2488, Dalton Connect, I liked him. I didn't love him. I thought he was a good player. I don't see him in the future with the Lakers, with the talent with Luka brought in and Austin Reeves. I just didn't think he had a place anymore, and you need a center, so it makes sense to go move off of Connect. If you have a distressed asset, I'm in for it. Zion, and I've said this for a long time, Ben Simmons. And Ben Simmons looks like he's getting close to getting a deal signed where he will be able to be bought out, a contract buyout to make him a free agent. This is the take earlier today from NBA on ESPN.
Trade market, it is now closed, which means we start to look towards the buyout market. Are there any names that we should be watching there?
Yeah, Malika, sources tell me Ben Simmons, the 3-time All-Star, and the Brooklyn Nets are working on a potential contract buyout to make him a free agent. The Los Angeles Clippers and Cleveland Cavaliers are potential suitors for him as a free agent. I expect now Ben Simmons will try to join a contender.
Okay, so Ben Simmons, a name we should be watching.
So try to join a contender. I don't know how I buy all that when it comes to the Clippers. I do think that it's interesting that they're going after the Cleveland Cavaliers are a team to watch out for. Now let's pull that up here. Yes, here it is. So this is the trade from earlier today. So the Nets are working on a potential trade deal. Marvin Bagley and the Wizards, he gets sent to Memphis in the Marcus Smart deal, which is very big. Indiana Pacers trade Wiseman, another guy who, like some of those big men in those mid 2010, late 2010 drafts. Ooh, it is tough to be you guys. Phoenix has informed teams that they're not trading KD. The Lakers move off, or Clippers trade for Kevin Porter Jr. So again, it might have been this was the Dennis Schroeder conversation we were having a little earlier, where he ends up on multiple teams. I cannot believe that Zion and CJ stayed with the teams that they were on. This is the one that caught my attention yesterday. DeAndre Hunter to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, the Cleveland Cavaliers this season, with Donovan Mitchell, who looks re-engaged, with Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, two twin towers, there's not a team in the East that can match up for them size for size. It just depends. Can you keep your size on the court? We've seen a lot of teams want to go big, and then they get played off the floor by smaller wings and smaller guards. If you can keep both those guys on the court and you can grind out some victories, you're in a good spot. And Hunter is an incredible defensive player. I'm very happy with the way that the Cavs have moved this season. They feel in a lot of ways like the Oklahoma City Thunder of the Eastern Conference. They have a young core. Those guys seem to really like each other. Oklahoma City was a big winner of this trade deadline by not making any major moves. I do truly believe that chemistry still matters in the NBA. When you look at across sports, college sports as well, chemistry is one of the most underrated parts of the game in a lot of ways. You need to be able to have guys who like each other, who can play with each other, who know each other's tendencies. I think that's super important going forward for all of these teams. So that's the trade deadline. The winners of the deadline, it's no joke. Like it's obviously the Los Angeles Lakers getting Luka Doncic. There was not a question in the world to me that they are the massive, massive winners from this NBA trade deadline. Getting Luka as well as getting a center. And again, I don't love Mark Williams, and I think Lakers fans at some point will dox him and probably put his address online and will send him a ton of hate mail at some point. It's won't happen in the first 6 weeks, but it'll happen. Laker fans are insane. Laker Nation is crazy. But it's good to go get a big man. It's a solid. They did what they needed to do. And now when you go in the buyout market, you potentially could add another piece. Now, the Ben Simmons to the Clippers doesn't move me. Ben Simmons to the Cavs does in a lot of ways. He adds size and defense. And even if he doesn't shoot the basketball once while he's there, if he plays and plays at even half of what he was when he was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, you potentially can have a very, very special player on your hands. So the Lakers are obviously the clear-cut winners, A++. The secondary winner here is the San Antonio Spurs. They went and they got De'Aaron Fox. They got a guy who matches perfectly with Victor Wembanyama. Not only does he match with Wemby in a way that they can run pick and roll with each other and they work together in tandem, and he's a scorer and he also can jump the lanes. He was a clutch player of the year. And in a lot of ways, he is the perfect complement to what Wemby brings to the table. But you got him for nothing, essentially nothing. It was a Bulls and Kings trade where the best player ended up in San Antonio. That's really what it came down to. And I keep thinking to myself, and I watched him last night against the Hawks, he is just a different type of player. He's a different type of guy who just fits with exactly what the Spurs want to do. And in probably more important than any of that, he fits the timeline. Victor Wembanyama is 21 years old. De'Aaron Fox is 27 years old. So even though there's a 6-year age difference there, you're looking at a guy who, when he is in the peak to the end of his peak, Victor will be at his absolute max capacity. Look, is De'Aaron Fox going to win a ton of championships in San Antonio? As a Spurs fan, I hope so. But you have to be realistic here. Everything that you want out of a point guard, he kind of brings to the table. And even though Chris Paul now gets put into a kind of a weird spot, He'll start some games, he'll probably come off the bench in others. This is exactly what he probably was hoping for when he signed with San Antonio. Like, he now can help one of the younger point guards in the league make that step, make that jump. Think about the point guards that he's helped mentor. Between Devin Booker and SGA, both those guys unlocked a different level, another level when they played with Chris Paul. I am so pumped and jazzed for what the Spurs did at this deadline. So they would be my other winner. Massive loser, Dallas Mavericks. The AD trade, we'll see how it goes. I've been trying to come to grips with it. I've been trying to think, like, is there a sneaky winner here? Is there like something that they did better? And if you take Luka out of it, you just said, hey, your team gets Anthony Davis. You got to be excited for that. He's a top 15 player in the league. And on some nights, he's a top 5 player. But you can't, you just cannot give up Luka to get Anthony Davis. It's just not a fair trade. And what they got back for it just didn't make any sense. I don't like that trade at all. And the other loser of this deadline, in my mind, you know, the Kings did get Zach LaVine to pair with Sabonis and DeMar. I don't think that they're a loser necessarily. The Charlotte Hornets, I don't see a way for that team to become competitive. Everything that they've done, every move they made, every player they've drafted, every free agent signing they've done, just doesn't seem like they are going to win games. And the NBA has to be concerned at some point, because there's some of these teams, the New Orleans Pelicans, the Charlotte Hornets, the Washington Wizards, all of these franchises who have just not been competitive for like a decade. Just, I don't know, in a season where the NBA ratings have been talked about ad nauseum, I don't see a world where these guys not being competitive helps you and helps your product at all. All right, we'll take a quick break, come back. Super Bowl is this Sunday. We'll talk about it next right here on Zimmel TV. All right, welcome back. Andrew Zimmel hanging out with you on Zimmel TV. Hopefully you guys consider subscribing, reviewing the channel, liking the channel, doing all those things to help us build the brand. You guys are day ones or D1s. I don't know. We got to come up with a name. We'll figure something else out here. All right. So just like in the beginning of the show, we had breaking news busting us in and, giving us something to talk about. I saw this tweet earlier today with Kendrick Perkins saying he was the real leader of the Oklahoma City Thunder. It doesn't mean your best player is your leader. When I was with the Thunder, it wasn't KD, it wasn't Russ, it wasn't James. I was the one leading. Kevin Durant then in turn says, I know this may be a reach, but this comment is by far the craziest ish I've seen this week. Kevin Durant, who almost was traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves to pair with Anthony Edwards. Now, as a guy who covered the Wolves, and I use cover in like the most loose terms. I was in the Midwest. I watched some Wolves games. I like the Wolves. I like their fans. They're a good fan base. They're a good team. I hope they win at some point. I hope they win something. The idea to put Kevin Durant next to Anthony Edwards is absolutely insane. And a couple of years ago, Sports Illustrated had a cover where it was times of changing essentially, and they had obviously thinking of the best shooter. Yes, you are, Bam. Yes, you are. So Sports Illustrated had a cover, and it was old school versus new school, and it's honestly one of the worst covers that they ever did. They had Justice Winslow with Dwayne Wade. They had Karl-Anthony Towns with Kevin Durant. They had LaMarcus Aldridge with Tim Duncan, which LaMarcus is already like in his 30s by that point. Anyway, it was an insane cover. But you could redo that cover if Kevin Durant ended up with Anthony Edwards in Minnesota, because Anthony Edwards is one of the biggest KD fans in the world. In fact, I think at one point he called him his GOAT, which is, again, kind of crazy, all things considered. And then you have Luka and LeBron, and those two guys absolutely love each other as well. All right, let's talk Super Bowl. It is this Sunday, and it doesn't get bigger than this. Super Bowl 59 in the Big Easy in New Orleans. And at this point, every single angle has been covered. Every single topic has been talked about. And we are going to talk about it in a, I think, more unique way, right? Oh, hey, they're going for their 4th in 5 years. Are they the greatest dynasty of all time? Are they better than any other dynasty ever? Are they better than the 20s Yankees? Are they better than the 90s Cowboys? Like, at this point, the Kansas City Chiefs are the most talked about sports team maybe in the world. I would argue probably in the last 10 years, there's not been a sports team, because of the different media outlets, because of how crazy it has been with Travis and Taylor. There is not a team that has been talked about more than the Kansas City Chiefs. And I have tried my hardest to come up with a way to not bet on them. I've tried to talk myself out of it 15 different ways. Well, you can't bet on them because they're the team that everybody hates. You can't bet on them because they're the best team in the league. You can't bet. And at every point this season, we talked about who is the best team, who's the best quarterback. There was quarterback tiers. And in some of those tiers, somehow Patrick Mahomes wasn't in the number one. I've always said this. Patrick Mahomes, to me, is a 1A, no question, top dog. And he's been that now for about 5 years. Even losing to Joe Burrow in the AFC Championship game, I was like, yeah, Joe Burrow played very good. He was very, very good. He was not better than Patrick Mahomes in that game. And there have been games in the playoffs where you can make a case that Lamar outplayed Mahomes or Josh Allen outplayed Mahomes. But at the end of the day, I think if you go pound for pound, snap for snap, season for season, game for game, there's not been anybody better than Mahomes since he really came into the league. We go through it and we talk about the guys who have beaten Mahomes. The only guy who has beaten him in the playoffs has been Tom Brady and Joe Burrow. And Joe Burrow can't consistently get there because he can't consistently stay healthy. And Tom Brady's in the booth now. So there's not anybody who you look at and you say to yourself, like, okay, that guy has Mahomes' number. Now, I do find it ironic that the first Super Bowl that the Chiefs won was against the San Francisco 49ers and Jimmy Garoppolo. And they were the young and upstart team. It was the year that Brady lost in Foxborough to the Titans. It was the last year that Brady and Belichick were together. And Mahomes goes and wins the Super Bowl against a guy that was in essentially the background for most of the second half of Brady's career in Jimmy Garoppolo. He goes and beats the guy after losing to Brady the season prior in the AFC Championship game. He goes and beats the guy who was Brady's heir apparent in a lot of ways, or was supposed to be the heir apparent in New England. Then they go and they play in the Super Bowl the next year against Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. And he doesn't have an offensive line. And he scrambles for, I think the stat was 150 yards of just trying to make something happen. He couldn't do it, couldn't make it happen. Then he loses. And then he comes back and now wins 2 in a row. And I never thought there would be a quarterback who would surpass Brady. I watched Brady surpass Joe Montana. I remember the conversation when Brady won his 4th, because it was 4-4, and people were saying, well, you know, Montana never lost, and they were holding those Super Bowl losses against Brady. And then Brady won his 5th, and then it was like, well, okay. Then he won his 6th, and then it was like, okay. And the greatest comeback of all time, there wasn't anybody better than Brady. And then he won his 7th in Tampa Bay, and it just was icing on the cake at that point. That, okay, the guy who we consider the greatest of all time, the guy who is across from me right now on a poster, Michael Jordan, has 6 rings, and now Brady has 7. The conversation of who's the greatest athlete, it's not a conversation anymore. It's not. He was at all times now, he holds all the records, he holds all the rings, he's the GOAT. He's the greatest of all time. And we see a guy in Mahomes who's on track to absolutely shatter his touchdown record, who's on pace to absolutely shatter his yards record, who's on pace to absolutely shatter his MVP record, who's going to shatter his Super Bowl marks. There's not a dude who's like him in the league. And the other part is that I think Mahomes is so great and so uniquely special that he overshadows maybe a conversation that we should have had like 2 years ago, which is Travis Kelce might actually be the best playoff receiver of all time. And I know that that's hard to kind of say, because I've pitched this idea to a couple people and they've all said, well, what about Jerry Rice? And I get that. Jerry Rice is incredible. But you look at Travis Kelce's receiving numbers in the playoffs, and he's only 200 yards behind Rice. Rice played 9 more seasons. And he's only 2 more touchdowns behind Jerry Rice. And Jerry Rice, again, played in more playoff games. So I think Travis Kelce, because of the Taylor Swift stuff, because of everything else, has completely been overshadowed. His greatness as an NFL player has been overshadowed. He is one of the greatest tight ends of all time. He might be the greatest playoff receiver of all time. And it doesn't get talked about nearly enough because of Taylor Swift and because of Patrick Mahomes, because of the star power of the 2 people who are also in his life, that it just doesn't, it's not spoken about in ways that other great players would have been spoken about. If Rob Gronkowski was doing this and jumping through tables and drinking Coors Light, it would get spoken about. If George Kittle had the numbers that Travis Kelce had, it would have been spoken about. But because Kittle and because Rob are 2 party-loving guys whose wives aren't the biggest pop star in the world, whose girlfriends aren't the biggest pop star in the world, it gets underappreciated, talked about. And this potentially could be Travis Kelce's final playoff game. And if that is the case, that he goes out on top with 3 titles and is essentially goes into the Hall of Fame as maybe the 2nd greatest tight end of all time and maybe the best playoff performer in NFL history at the wide receiver position. Now, granted, he's not a wide receiver, he's a tight end, but he doesn't do the things that other tight ends do. I would not put him in the same category as Kittle or Gronkowski. Those guys block. Kittle and Gronkowski, those guys have to take linebackers. A lot of times, Kelce is lining up out of the slot. He's moving around. He's a tight end in name only in a lot of ways. That's my Chiefs take, is that if you're rooting against the Kansas City Chiefs, I understand if you're a Josh Allen fan or a Lamar Jackson fan or a Taylor Swift hater, maybe you're a Kanye West fan and you just don't like what they're doing, and maybe you're a Joe Rogan fan and you just don't like Travis Kelce. I get all of that. I understand all that. But I can't root against this Chiefs team. I just can't. And it's part of it is because I'm an NFC fan. You see my little Vikings ball behind me. I can't root against I can't root for the NFC. as the Eagles have been one of the most obnoxious teams in the league. Their fans are some of the most obnoxious in the league. And I don't want to make it about them, but it's just the Chiefs. They are a team. They are an organization. They have a fan base that I can kind of respect. I can get behind what Kansas City is doing. And then there's a lot of bandwagon fans, sure. But there was a lot of bandwagon fans with the Cowboys and the Patriots and everything else like that. And I find those fans much more annoying than I find Kansas City Chiefs fans. That's just me, at least. I can't root against greatness. I can't do it. Once you hit a certain level, once you hit a certain peak, that I'm gravitating towards you. I want you to be successful. I want you to win all of the championships. I want to tell my kids and stuff that I'm rooting for them. You know, I just can't. I can't not root for the Chiefs. Now, there's a lot of cool storylines on the other side of things. The Eagles have Saquon Barkley, which is essentially Luka Doncic times 100 in a lot of ways. How do you cut your number 4 overall pick from a couple years ago? Bill Simmons said it might have been the best running back he's ever seen come out of the college ranks. I don't want to say that, but he might be the best college running back since Adrian Peterson. He might be the best college running back that just could do it all. He can catch, he can run, and you saw him in that game against the Commanders. His ability to stay on his feet, his ability to push defenders off and fight through contact, he's running with a purpose. And if the Eagles are going to win this game, it's going to be on his legs. It's going to be on how good of a game does Saquon Barkley have. The last time these two teams played in the Super Bowl, the Spagnuolo defense dared Jalen Hurts to throw, and Jalen Hurts played very well. And he has huge weapons. He's got Zach Ertz. He has A.J. Brown. He has Devontae Smith. He has good tight end work. His ability to move the ball down the field with his own legs. He's a very talented quarterback. I don't understand a lot of the people who say that he isn't any good or try to diminish what he does to just try to simplify him down to a tush push. I don't think that he's a Brock Purdy type, dare I say. I think that he's a guy who can get the job done with his arms and his legs, and he's dual talent, very talented. I just don't know if the Chiefs do it again and say, beat us with your arm, and they just try to shut down Saquon. I don't know if Jalen Hurts can do the same thing twice. I don't know if he'll have that magic. And then word comes out that the flu has absolutely torn through the Eagles. And I saw stories this week about how the food in New Orleans, a lot of it was undercooked. I don't know if you saw that story. There was food poisoning. So there's a lot of Eagles players who are dealing with flu-like symptoms and who are sick. And I just don't. I come into the Super Bowl thinking to myself, like, is there a path for them to win the title? And there is. It's going to be on Saquon's legs. It's going to be on Jalen Carter and that defense to make something happen, to disrupt Mahomes. The only time he's lost in the Super Bowl, the only time he's lost, honestly, in the playoffs, has been when they're able to, when they've been able to get some pressure on him and make him move around and make him run. And if it comes down to it, that would be the way to beat him. But the Kansas City offensive line is pretty damn good, man. They do a pretty good job of keeping Mahomes upright. And I know that the conversation has turned to the refs, and can the refs prevent this from happening? Can the refs stop the Chiefs from winning, or are the refs on their side? I don't see why the NFL would rig it for Kansas City of all places. It just doesn't make sense to me why they would try to make this tiny Midwestern city, in comparison to the New Yorks and the LAs and the Miamis. It doesn't make sense why they would rig everything for this tiny city in the middle of the Midwest to win all these games. Why it would make sense for a kid who played at Texas Tech to be the greatest quarterback of all time. Why it would make sense for them to prop up a tight end out of Cincinnati. It doesn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense. In fact, I guarantee you that Taylor Swift would prefer to have her boyfriend walking red carpets with her at the Grammys than having to hang out in New Orleans and eat oysters and, just try to prepare for the game on Sunday. Taylor Swift doesn't want Travis Kelce to win the same way that Giselle didn't want Tom Brady to play. If it was up to Giselle, Tom Brady would lose in the first round of every game. Every playoff, he would be out so that she can have her husband back. So Taylor Swift can have her boyfriend back. There's no ref rigging in this whole thing. It doesn't make any sense. It never did. So I'm going Kansas City in this one. I've laid it all out. I think that the defense is, I don't want to say better, but I think they're more equipped to deal with the offense of Philadelphia than the Philadelphia defense is equipped to try to beat Kansas City. I don't see a world where the Kansas City offense doesn't work their way down the field. And I've learned my lesson betting against Patrick Mahomes. He is the same way that you don't bet against Tom Brady, the same way that you didn't bet against Mike Tyson. You don't bet against Patrick Mahomes, because if you do, he'll get the knockout every single time. All right, that's going to do it for the show today. Like I said, tomorrow, filling in for Craig Way on 1300 The Zone. You can listen to it on the free iHeartRadio app, or not. It's going to be a good show, I think. Have a bunch of really good college and NFL writers coming on to talk Super Bowl with us. And then, of course, Craig will talk UT athletics with us as well. And then on 5:30, WOAI, same iHeartRadio app, flip over for Spurs pregame coverage. I'll be on that as well. So a lot going on a Friday for us, and then Saturday as well. Monday, we'll be back, same time, same place, right here on Zimmel TV on YouTube. Continue to share and support the page. Follow me on all socials, and we'll be back again on Monday to react to how the Super Bowl went down. I'm going Chiefs 31, Eagles 27. I think it's going to be a 4-point game. I think they covered the spread. All right, thanks.